largest psychological experiment with roughly 2.6 billion people around the world under some form of lockdown. Now, what are the likely implications of being cooped up at home for an extended or indefinite amount of time? How should we be minding our minds as a pandemic that threatens our physical bodies lurks outside? Well, Dominic Mwangi, a psychologist, speaker, dean of students and lecturer at Tangaza University College, joins me now. Dominic, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you.
First question, when you think about the current situation, which is pretty much all over the world, we're talking about social distancing, banned social gatherings, curfew. This is really going to impact people. We're telling them to stay at home. What will the implications of this be? Because you're only thinking about also mistrust between each other. You're wondering, is someone sick or not? What does this mean for us moving forward?
Yeah, so thank you, first of all, for having me on your show. And first of all, to clarify, I'm the former dean of students at Tangaza, not the current. So I think one of the things that we need to clarify here is there is an importance to differentiate between physical distancing and social distancing. Now, we are social animals by nature. So when you ask people to separate, I think the key word here is physical distancing. By the fact of being social animals, we need people to be together. People need to be together. Now, one of the consequences of this quarantine and isolation is loneliness. Now, Harvard University did a study where they accompanied a number of people for a long number of years. And what they found out was, interestingly, is that loneliness kills at a very high rate, almost equal to alcoholism and equal to obesity in some statistics. So this is an interesting phenomenon that loneliness is going to encumber very many people, especially those who are single and they cannot have people they love visiting them. You can think of widows and widowers and elderly parents who cannot, their children are far away. That I cannot visit my own parents because they are elderly and I don't want to pass on to them the virus. So there's loneliness. Number two, coming from this is a loss of meaning in life. You can imagine someone who every day was engaged, providing for the family, having a job every day that occupied them from morning to the evening, and now they don't have that anymore. So you can experience that sense of loss of meaning in life, especially if you are the one who was the breadwinner, providing for your family, and you cannot do that anymore. Or if you lose someone that you love because of the disease, then and because many people attach their meaning in life with their faith, with their religious faith, there can be that sort of a loss of meaning in life. And because of a consequence of this, we will see an increase in substance abuse as people try to bridge this gap, this loneliness, this emptiness, this boredom. What can I do? So maybe I take weed, or sorry to say, or whatever drugs, illegal or legal, that are there, alcohol. People will take that in order to bridge this gap. And the fourth negative effect that usually is there is what we call the survivor's guilt. Now picture this: 3 friends are in a car and they have an accident, and 2 friends die and 1 survives. The one who survives suffers what we call in psychology a survivor's guilt. Why did I survive and my 2 friends died? So the same thing will happen. After the virus, you'll see maybe you did not suffer from the effects of the coronavirus. You did not lose your job. Maybe nobody you loved died. People start suffering from survivor's guilt. I think here also it's very important to realize that people will not suffer the same. There are people who are staying away and they are comfortable staying at home because maybe they're introverts. Introverts could be enjoying this. They're like, yeah, we have been waiting for this, the holiday that we have been waiting for. But extroverts, who are the majority in any population, are going to suffer quite a lot, because for them, meeting is very, very, very important for them. And so people in a country where you find almost 40% of the population are living below the poverty line, they cannot afford to stay at home. Okay, so there is that. We need to realize that not everybody is suffering from the consequences of this in equal measure. Right. On the positive side, I have to say there will be a lot of positive things also flying around. As we have seen in one of the local dailies, that there is a sense of solidarity, sweeping across the country. People are coming together to help each other out. We have seen people providing water and food stuff in the slums and other places where there is need. So there is positive consequences to this, and we cannot ignore that. Number two, positive consequences. Finally, kids get to spend time with their parents. The parents may not enjoy this very much, especially if they have teenagers, but well. So there is that sense of spending time with the children. Children get to spend time with their parents. I don't know if you have seen this dad in quarantine, dads in quarantine playing with their children. This is fantastic. And let me tell you something. Psychology today shows that girls who come from families, from fatherless families, or where fathers are not very present to their life in a positive way, tend to start their puberty earlier. Puberty early means they also start their menstruation early, in addition to other changes that happen in puberty. Starting your puberty early also means engaging in sexual activities earlier. Now that fathers get to spend time with their daughters, we will see maybe a reduction in this in the long run.
Yeah.
If you want to know the majority of young men who do substance abuse, a lot of statistics show that a majority of them come from fatherless families who never took time to bond with them. So these chances are there. And also husbands and wife finally get to spend time together. Now there'll be consequences to these, two kinds of consequences. One, conflict. Those problems you have been avoiding by waking up early and leaving home early and coming late in the evening, now you have to face them. Now, how do you face them? Maybe there's conflict, increase in domestic violence, or couples might say, okay, fine, let us work now these problems out finally. We are here, we have time, let's work this out. Another one, as I finish up on this part, is there will be an increased sense of meaning in life when you realize that a small thing like a virus can bring economies, the first world economies, to a standstill. There'll be people start prioritizing, maybe fame is not as important as relationships, appreciating simple things of life, realizing that life can come at the end, a life can end at the snap of a finger. So people start appreciating the small things in life. And finally, at least in my opinion, young people, Kenyans in general and population in general, will be more demanding to their governments. They will not wait in the future to have another pandemic where there is no food security, where there is no health infrastructure. So any politician who thinks that Kenyans or any population will go on as usual after this pandemic, I think they're gravely mistaken.
Right.
People will have that sense of social consciousness. How can we avoid this in the future? And a lot of these changes will have to come from the politician's side.
A lot to consider, Dominic, and I'm glad you mentioned the positive outcomes as well, because it's not all doom and gloom.
Absolutely.
We have to talk about a special group, and I have a tweet here from Wanjiru saying, I'm living with bipolar disorder during this COVID-19 situation. It is unsettling. I'm worried about my medication and treatment because I only get medication for 1 month. Luckily, I have sessions with my psychologist via phone. I mean, and this is a critical group of people because they've already been dealing with depression and anxiety. And then you add on top of that this whole directive to socially isolate. How do they cope at a time like this?
I think one of the things that we need to be very clear to understand is coronavirus and this pandemic, it's going to hurt. It's going to cause pain. So there is no denying this. And there are no simple answers. And I am not even going to try to give simple answers to this, because some of the psychological consequences that we psychologists tend to deal with are structural, meaning they are coming from social structures that are not serving the people, right? So if the government was ready with reserves of food, and the government was ready with the social structures were working, possibly we will not be dealing with this kind of consequences. So we need to be very clear that where we are right now, we are suffering from consequences, maybe possibly of structures of the society that were not geared to serving the human person, right? So we have to be very clear on that. But speaking to this particular group, the first thing that I would say is ensure as much as you can that you are taking the medication that you are required to take by the psychiatrist or by the clinical psychologist whom you are seeing. So kindly adhere to that medication. Secondly, you need to understand that being anxious is a very human feeling, a very human emotion. Even when I was waiting to appear on national television, I was a bit anxious. I was a bit, I was a bit worried how I will do. Definitely, it's a human emotion. So we need to realize this. Thirdly, is you need to rest. Now, some of the things that we look down is the question of sleep. Now, sleeping enough means not beyond, say, 9 hours, and not less than 7 hours. Now, there is of course, there's a population of people who can survive and thrive with below 7 hours of sleep, and some who need more than 9 hours. But majority of people function between 7 and 9 hours. So make sure that you are sleeping enough so that your body and your brain processes and rests and is able to deal with the anxiety and other mental health issues. Secondly, also the food that you eat. There is a very good chance when you're in a situation of depression, anxiety, to eat a lot of salty food, a lot of sugary food, a lot of starch, which also just increases your weight and also makes you to produce stress hormones, as we call them, the cortisol stress hormone. So ensure that you are, resting enough and eating well, and move. When you're locked down in a house, there is a very good chance that your movement is very minimal, maybe just from where you're sitting to where the food is. Very small, very minimum movement. Now, your body needs to move. You need to spread nutrition in your body, but even more so oxygen in your brain, which is basically the machine, So you need to ensure that you move. Go up and down the stairs. Don't let a whole day go before you move up and down. Right. Another very important strategy is meditation. Meditation is not very complicated. There are different forms of meditation that you can get online, but even the simple one is to sit down on a chair that has a straight back and close your eyes and simply focus on your breathing slowly, like 5 minutes to 10 minutes every single day. And this will definitely help to make you feel better. Yeah. And finally, on this particular point is talk to somebody. Get someone that you can talk to. It could be through an email, it could be through chatting, it could be through via call, but get someone whom you can be vulnerable to. Being vulnerable is a strength, it's not a weakness. We need to be very clear about this. Talking to someone about the emotions that you're struggling with, it's a strength. Vulnerability is a strength. That's what I would say for now. There could be others, but for now, let me point out those.
Oh, great. And thanks for touching on self-care tips, because that's critical at this time. Let's talk about the coverage of this pandemic. Everywhere you turn, if it's not the TV screen, your phone is coronavirus, coronavirus, coronavirus. And so I guess to avoid being inundated with information, and a lot of people have been concerned about the dissemination of misinformation, how do you manage? Because you do need to be informed, you do need to know what's happening, but not to overdo it. How do you find that balance?
Yeah, this calls for serious discipline. Many experts are saying too much negative information is not good for you. It's not good for you, because the more you consume so much information, negative information, the more your brain panics and it produces, adrenaline and cortisol, which are converted to stress hormones. They become stress hormones, and they drain and bring down your psyche. So one of the things that I can invite people is, during a pandemic like this, obviously you want to know from which direction is the disease coming from, So one of the things that you need to do is to exercise discipline. You can say, I'll watch only news in the morning, an update in the morning, and another update in the late evening, and that's it. In between, keep yourself busy. One of the self-care tips is to ensure, even during these times, that you have a structured daily schedule, which is very, very difficult. I understand. Even I struggle with that. So we need to be careful on this. Too much consumption of negative information is going to only increase your sense of anxiety, stress, and you start even panicking. So reduce the amount of information that you are taking every day concerning coronavirus. And allow me at this point to speak about especially those who have young children. It's important not to hide them about what is happening, especially if they know that there is a lockdown, that they know that they cannot move as usual. Explain to them what coronavirus is, how it is passed on. Explain to them why there is a lockdown, why they cannot go to school. Explain to them that government agencies and health agencies are doing the best they can to deal with them. Don't hide from them, but at the same time, avoid them seeing every single day also this news of death and disease. They do not have the brain capacity to process this very well without maybe having a post-traumatic stress disorder, and that's not what you want for very young children.
Absolutely. And before I let you go, Dominic, we have to talk about a very critical, important group at this time, the frontliners. These Correct. Are the doctors, these are the nurses, other medical workers who are literally in hospitals. They're handling this firsthand, and you can only imagine the mental health toll it's taking on them. What do they need to be doing to manage, because it will hit hard?
First of all, I want to thank them. I want to thank the nurses and the doctors who are doing absolutely amazing work. And also I want to include in the front line the journalists who have to be there to report. about this particular disease. I have seen some journalists going to hospitals of coronavirus patients. And also I want to put also here policemen and women who, as you have seen, they have to work during the day to ensure people are wearing masks and people are, that there's not too much, people are not meeting in crowds. And at the same at night, they have to work also to maintain the curfew. That is a lot of work. Now, what happens to them? What are some of the emotions that they will go through? The first, of course, is fear. Fear that they will get the disease and fear that they will pass that disease to the people who love them, to their families, and that causes a lot of fear for them. And so at this point, I would really want to encourage the government to ensure that healthcare workers, journalists going to places where there's coronavirus patients, that they have the personal protective equipment that will at least give them or assuage their fears. And so there's going to be fatigue and burnout, and there's also going to be displacements. Displacement is, take for example, if you cannot, your boss is angry at you or your workplace is toxic, you go and shout, of course, at your boyfriend or girlfriend, or you shout at your husband or wife or your children. That's called displacement. So these frustrations tend to get passed on. We call that displacement. So, and of course, loneliness. There are many doctors who are not even going home because they're afraid of passing the disease to the people that love them. So there's that sense of loneliness now. So what can they do? The first thing that I can say is, as a doctor, as a policeman, as a journalist, check on your colleague. Don't assume that they are okay. So check on your colleague. The first thing I would say is mutual support, ensuring that you are there for each other.
Yeah.
Number two, the presence of mental health workers like ourselves. We would be willing to be there also as frontliners to listen to the doctors, to help them release the emotions, to debrief them. It would be important to have a psychologist on board, and also spiritual guides, pastors and priests maybe could be there. Maybe a doctor would want to speak to his pastor. This pastor should be there on call. Number three that I would say is getting rest. It is so very important to get rest. When you don't get rest, you start getting agitated and angry and upset, which is going to make you perform even less and make maybe even mistakes. If you're a doctor and you're not resting enough, chances of mistreating people are even higher because your brain is not resting, your brain is not alert. So rest is very, very important. And finally, on this one, I would advocate again for them to be given personal protective equipment so that at least they can assuage that fear that they have of getting the disease. This is what I have in mind for now.
Right. Thank you so much, Dominic, for your time. We are out of it, but just some key points. Get enough sleep, healthy eating, move, meditate, breathe, and talk to someone. Thank you so much. Let's take a short break here on Citizen Weekend. Sports news up next. Stay